All right, I've been given the signal, so for those of you who are here to hear about Marine Corps recruiting, I'm going to talk to you about it. I got a handful of notes, but I'll be honest with you, I don't operate that way. I'm just going to talk to you because I think we're all doing the same challenge. So even if you're here to figure out what's happening with what we're doing, I think all of us here, if you're in the military, connected to DOD, or in the private sector, you're doing the same thing. You're fighting for talent. You're trying to figure out how to get the next people that are equipped in a lot of ways to execute whatever task that you have. So I'm going to talk to you from that position. So you might be like, well, why do I want to hear about what the Marine Corps is doing? Because other than the Space Force, for DOD, we were the only service to actually make our mission requirement last year. So last year we made it by the skin of our teeth. There was a little bit of planning to that because they wanted us to hit the number on target, which I thought was crazy anyway. All right, so, and I should preface all this with, you're going to get a lot of my opinions, and I will preface when it's a Marine Corps opinion or whether I'm just talking because I want to talk. And you are in a position where you have to listen to it. But I will tell you, we were kind of aiming at a target, but we were over by about 21. Could we have gotten a little bit more? Probably yes, if we've been told to do it or not, but we made it and we knew it, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps was the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps when we were going through that process and had already testified that we were going to make it. So as far as all the Marines were concerned, we were going to make it, and we did. And you might be asking, well, how does it look this year? I think we're still in a knife fight in a phone booth pretty much. It's a pretty tight race, but I think we're still on glide path this year to make it as well, based on the mission requirements that we received this year. So I'll go through the slide, and it's really just going to give you kind of an idea how we do it, and then I'll talk to you about the challenges we're facing. So what you see up there now is a map of what I'm in charge of. So I wear 3 hats. I am the Commanding General of Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego. That's my base hat. Then I'm in charge of recruit training, which is my training hat, which means I'm in charge of all the people that we recruit in our region to be trained and turned into Marines and to go to their first step of entry-level training. But what you see up there is my Western Recruiting Region hat. So I'm in charge of everything west of the Mississippi, but including Indiana. I have 3 districts. Each district has an obscene amount of square mileage to cover. They each have 8 recruiting stations, which are written in those little blocks that you see up there. But each one of those recruiting stations has substations. So if you add up all the physical locations that I'm responsible for, it's about 650, ranging from 1 to 2 Marines to 5 or 6, or a recruiting station which may have 10 or 12. They're just dispersed all over the AO. But as you see, with those 3 areas and those 3 districts, I'm covering 3 different populations. So I got to recruit officers, because I didn't even talk about the officer selection stations on there. There's prior service, which means the people that we're trying to grab who had gotten out of the Marine Corps, we're trying to route them back in, as well as people that we're trying to get who left the Marine Corps and route them to the reserve force. And the bulk of my recruiting is non-prior service, people who are in high schools and community colleges. So you see the number of recruiters that are spread over that region, and you see the amount of percentages of what we're responsible for shipping in the Western Recruiting Region. Now, I've got some of my sister service here. The one thing that makes the Marine Corps a little bit more unique is by making me in charge of recruit training and the recruiting, I'm in charge of that whole pipeline. So I can adjust. I can go, hey, we need to recruit more people this month. I can adjust the training pipeline and say, okay, we're going to bring in this much more this month, and I can figure out how to make those numbers match. So having both allows me to have a rheostat. It also allows me to affect training. So if I know the recruiting population is going to maybe come in a little less physically prepared, I can talk to the training side and say, what adjustments are you going to make to manage that they're coming in a little bit less physically prepared? And we did that last year because there's been a dynamic shift in our experience in recruiting. It used to be, because I got a recruiting ribbon, I've done it before, it used to be that we could find somebody who wants to join, get them medically qualified in about 30 days or less, and then spend about 3 or 4 months preparing them to go to boot camp. The dynamic has shifted, and I'll talk about it a little bit later in a slide. Due to the increased challenges of getting people medically qualified, I spent about 3 or 4 months interacting with an applicant, trying to get them qualified, and then about a month or so with them being medically qualified and able to train them for boot camp. So it's completely inverted the amount of time. So even though my recruiter may know a recruit for about 6 months, it used to be that they knew them as an applicant for about a month and 5 months getting them ready. But now they know them as about 4 or 5 months of medical qualification, testing, retesting. You pop positive for drugs, you need to go get clean, come back. Once you do a clean test, then we'll applicant you, then we'll get you qualified, then we'll contract you, then we'll prepare you for boot camp. So it's completely inverted at this point in time. And that's won't be on the slide. It's more reality that I wanted to share with you. So, oops, I dropped it and it went back, sorry. So when you talk about the challenges, what we see in the Marine Corps is that the intangibles still reign supreme. So the Marine Corps, if you've looked at our brand and how we've been recruiting, we've always stayed with the same thing. You heard our commandant say last year, he was asked, hey, what kind of bonuses are you doing? And our commandant said, their bonus is being a Marine. So our whole thing that we've been doing and we still continue to do is not shape ourselves to become more attractive to who we want. That's not what we're doing. We're saying who we want is who we are. In other words, we need a certain type of person to come into the Marine Corps to continue to have a Marine Corps. So that's the goal. If you feel that you fit that, then we have something we can talk about. But we're not going to change what the Marine Corps is so that we can get more people. Well, that works for us because usually one of the coolest things one of my recruiters can do is look at somebody and go, I don't know if you can cut it. Typically, the people we want, they turn around and go, well, wait a minute, I can cut it. And they show back up, right? And if they don't, I will tell you this. I have recruiters working for me right now that have gotten Navy Achievement Medals and Army Achievement Medals from referring people to our sister services. Kid you not. I was at a recruiting station, those joint recruiting stations where all the services are there. If we have an applicant that we keep working with and we can't get them qualified because they don't meet our basic qualifications, I've had my recruiters go, hey, come with me, walk right over to the Navy recruiter and go, hey, can you hook this guy up because we can't do it. And they've actually gotten awarded by the Navy for handing over applicants. Now, I'm not saying that because we're better. What I'm saying about that is that I think my recruiters get the point, which is it's about service. We can have sibling rivalry, and we can bicker, and my uniform's better than yours, or whatever we want to argue about. But the truth of the matter is that what we're really trying to do with the young people that we are attempting to get into our organization is we're trying to inspire them to serve. That's it. So there's no reason why somebody who has chosen to serve shouldn't be helped to be given the opportunity to do it. Now, of course, my recruiters are on mission, so they're going to try to get their bones first, as they better, because I need them to. But the truth of the matter is, if they don't, and if we have to go to somewhere else, we're going to have to do it. But the pool of qualified applicants is shrinking. And I'll show you a little kind of breakdown of how it's shrinking. And there's some unusual competition we've seen. In some of my recruiting spaces, what you'll see is that we have competitors that used to not exist. You know, there's a grocery store in Texas that offers their applicants money to complete college at the grocery store. I didn't know I was competing with that. Normally I'm competing with some high-tech cats or college or something. No, we're competing with local industry that wants talent and can't mess around. They got to get it to maintain their business. The COVID-19 aftershocks, I think we see that mostly in the academic realm. As many of this group knows, we do the Armed Forces Vocational Aptitude Battery, ASVAB for short. And normally when we provide that test, you can get up to 100 points. And the Marine Corps has a minimum requirement of 30. Minimum requirement 30. It used to be that in unusual scenarios, you might have to get a waiver for a person with a 35 or a 30, and we were shocked. No. Now it is not uncommon for my recruiters to have single-digit scores. 9s, 8s. Now, one could go into some kind of speech about the educational system, but I tell you right now, I think some of it is after effects and the aftershocks of COVID, when some of my applicants were in 9th and 10th grade and just didn't get fractions. They don't have it. They don't know what they're doing. And they just can't pass the test. Now, typically the challenge for our recruiting team is to figure out whether or not it's truly an indication of the person's intellectual potential, or as if it's the after effects of what I just mentioned, a lack of education. So what I find is happening in my recruiting force is because we don't have any other system to do it, is that the recruiters make a call based on the individual. So somebody doesn't pass, they might tell them, hey, go back, here's some study materials, here's how we're going to do it, and they'll keep working with them. If the score is too low, they have to hand them off. Sometimes we can't make up the difference of like 20 points. But if you get like a 20, 25, whether or not they're supposed to, the recruiter's probably going to be working with them. Hey, let's do some studying. Let's figure this out. But some of our sister services can take them at a lower score. I want to say Navy's down to 10. So that's why in some cases we'll have a person with maybe a 15 or a 20, and we can't get them the extra mile. We think they're a good character. That's when we walk them over to our sister services and say, hey, we can't do it. Now, there's a couple reasons why I think that's happening, because I want to make sure you don't get it wrong about us and our sister services. We're making these changes because we have to, but each of the services are adjusting in different ways. So the Army and the Navy have created different mechanisms by which they can bring people on board and help them get their ASVAB score up, and if they do, they can bring them in. The Marine Corps has not switched to that because we've always used the delayed entry program to make that happen, to get people's scores up. It has always been the burden of the recruiting force to close that gap, and we haven't changed our way of doing it. But I will tell you that overall, the risk associated with lowering ASVAB standards, the example is the space you're in right now. So it used to be when the Marine Corps was doing this massive turnover, recruiting 30-some thousand a year and letting 20,000 some go each year, that we could do that because there might have been something considered a dumb grunt. And just to be clear, I'm a grunt. So I say that affectionately. There's no such thing as that anymore. The average infantry Marine carries about 17 pieces of serialized gear on their body. They carry scopes, tablets, infrared scopes, silencers. They have all kinds of high-tech gear, let alone drones and the ability to commit. We can't do it anymore. It's just a high-tech fight. Half the stuff you see out here, you got to be at least smart enough to figure out how to use it. So we can't cut any corners. So our commandant has made it very clear to us, we will not reduce our standards. Now the problem, competing for entry-level employees. These are the extra guys on there that I was talking about. Chipotle. So the Marine Corps and the Navy and the Army and the Air Force, we're fighting with Chipotle, right? To figure out whether or not we do that. Well, that's why you can't do this fight strictly off of the tangible benefits. That's not the way to win this fight. The way to win this fight is you inspire service, and the people we want, if you think about it, the people we want are not necessarily the people who joined solely for the pay and benefits. Because anybody who's ever served in the military knows that after you've been in for a little bit, you realize you ain't getting paid enough to do what you did. So that's a no-go. So really what we're looking for are people who are inspired to serve. And so usually this doesn't scare me because I have recruiters whose job it is to help the person who wants to think about doing this make the delineation between if they only want this and if they want to join. Now that doesn't mean that every 18-year-old that we recruit to boot camp has it figured out and thinks our country is great and has volunteered for service. It just means at least in their mind, based on our conversation, they understand what that means. And we're going to run them through what we believe is a transformation process that if it sticks, that now we've made a better citizen. We've made a better person who understands what's happening in society. If they stay, we have a career Marine like me, or they could be like my son, who did his 4 years and now works as an IT specialist with Epic Healthcare. Okay, I mean, can't be mad at my son, right? You know, he's got to do what he's got to do. All right, so here's our qualifications. They haven't changed. Bulk of the Marines we're looking for 17 to 28. We're looking for technically a 31 or higher on the ASVAB is what we're really looking for. As it relates to moral character, you know we're not going to get like squeaky clean people, but there's some standards that we go through. Usually those waivers have to come to me, and we're not bringing anybody crazy in. We're not bringing any, domestic violence cases in. We're not bringing, armed robbery in them or whatever. We're going to look through all those, but we are doing a whole person concept, and we've had some strange stuff come through. And usually we look, and I rely on a recruiter, the recruiting station commander, a recruiting station sergeant major, all these people who know that they're making Marines. And I always tell them, if this person you believe should serve with you, if you're willing to stake your life on the fact that they may be serving with you, then all right, let's do it, right? So usually moral is pretty tough. Physical is our toughest issue because lifestyles have changed. We have a more sedimentary lifestyle. We have a longer ramp up to get our qualified people up to our physical standard. And one of the things that distinguishes the Marine Corps from the other services is that we place a higher premium on physical performance. It's just part of our DNA. It's part of who we are. You take it for what it's worth, but that's how we do it. So that means our ramp up is a little harder. That's why our boot camp is a little longer, to try to get the person to that standard. So education, we often mostly we're looking at the same standard as everybody else, high school or high school equivalent. We tend to have more high school traditional high school graduates, because that's where our recruiting mechanism works best, in high schools. But we have a significant, we get homeschoolers, GED equivalency, we'll get all that, we'll take it. Drug test. I've got my guys doing a study right now. The biggest challenge here is that upwards in my half of the country, I want to say I have about 20 states that I recruit from that have changed the marijuana policy. All right, so California, got a lot of stations in California, New Mexico, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, right? I started laying those out, and I'm going, hey, think about it. It used to be drugs are illegal. So the recruiter sits down and says, hey, you ever done drugs? And they're like, no. We're going to test you. Now it's like, you ever done drugs? Of course. like who has it, right? You know, I can go down the street and buy it right now. You know? I mean, heck, I'm at the point now, I have to look at food when I go out just to make sure they ain't got some CBD oil up in there, you know? Or some kind of craziness in there, right? So it's different. And so what we've been requiring and what the MEP stations require is a clean test before they go to contract. So what that can do sometimes is in maybe a state like California where you can legally, recreationally do it, they come in, they say it, we may not test them, we may say go back, go away, come back when you haven't done it, then we test them. Sometimes they still test hot, and then we say we're going to let you sit for 30 days or 6 weeks, depending on what they said they smoked, because now there's new variants of this stuff that stay in your system longer due to vaping. So now it's a thing in these legal states for them to go to the local store, buy a vape capsule, and vape marijuana or THC at a higher concentration level that stays in their system longer. Additional challenge. And the real question is, what are we going to do potentially? This is the deep question. What are we going to do potentially if federally it becomes okay to do it? Because I got alcohol tests and I can tell if you're doing alcohol, but I have no idea if you're high on marijuana, man. I mean, that was the big experiment with Colorado, right? Everybody was like, hey, what's going to happen? And then everybody's like, okay, cats and dogs are living together. It's a new thing. And so other states started doing it, and that's the challenge we have, though. Tattoos. The Marine Corps is the strictest on the tattoo policy. And that's been a challenge for us because culture has changed. And so the number of people with tattoos, sleeves, or whatever, it's out of control right now, right? So if LeBron James is your idol and he's got sleeves, then you got sleeves. And you're probably a basketball player who's probably the person I'm looking for because you are in physical shape and somebody's been paying attention to you and making you get your grades, and now you got tattoos, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, here's the basics for the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has said, okay, we get it. Okay, we know we're slow to the game, but we get it. But we're not doing neck and above, and we're not doing on the hands. We're not doing that. So usually every week I'm looking at 20, 30 waivers a week coming in every day that I have to look at and determine whether or not they're 1 millimeter below the ulna or if it's on the neck. Or I got guys removing their tattoos and girls removing their tattoos to come in because they want to be part of the Marine Corps. But that's how we're dealing with it. Our biggest thing that I really have to get concerned about is content. All right, I can probably get over your sleeve, but if your sleeve is filled with, I don't know, the Third Reich, I might have to go, no. Okay, that's a no-go. And you may laugh a little bit, but just a couple days ago, I had one that had some weird name, weird saying on it. We looked it up, and it had to do with some kind of freaking white supremacy thing. So I was like, hey, all right, no. So here's how the rates of disqualification work out. Kind of an eye chart. But it will show you that usually when you're disqualified for us, it's multiple reasons. Most people are eligible, but we have some overweight, medical, physical. That type of stuff manifests itself in ADHD medication use. Sometimes the biggest challenges we have are getting them qualified enough to go to MEPS, which means getting referrals, getting consults, people checking them out based on previous injuries. But here's what those numbers look like. This is what it turns into. So if you look at that chart, that's the filter. So let's say we've contacted 1.1 million. Out of that, we might get 200,000 appointments. But out of that, now we only get 89,000 interviews. Now, out of those 89,000 interviews, a working applicant is somebody who is qualified. They're eligible, so they've passed the test. They're medically as close as we could get them, and now we're going to take them to MEPS, the Military Enlisted Processing Station. We're going to take them there, and we're going to have them swear an oath and join. So that number breaks down to 31,000. Now, out of that 31,000, there's still some people who are going to show up at MEPS, and they're going to go, "You're not qualified." Or we tested them, and their drug test was clean, but they showed up at MEPS, and MEPS has a better drug test, and they pop positive. So now they're gone again. So that number starts to dwindle down, and then it turns into this year, because this year, in my region, I've been missioning for about 15,500 just for me. My counterpart has his own 15,500 or whatever they get. Last year I did 17.5, but it breaks down into that small level of a session. So that's the pipeline, and that's how it kind of shrinks itself. That's the business. All right, so what's the difference? And I'm going to tell you, I don't care what job you have, I don't care what industry you're in. The difference to me is applying the best people in your institution to the recruiting process. So if the recruiting process matters to you, you have to apply talent to it. They have to be the best. What the Marine Corps does is we pick our top 30% of our O4s or our majors for our Navy counterparts or our lieutenant commanders. We pick the top 30% to go on the recruiting force. We screen them. We screen our O3s, our captains, who go out to do the recruiting mission. And our O2s, who are going to become O3s, we screen them as well. Our enlisted recruiters are a special duty assignment. We promote the people who go on recruiting duty. 85% of the O4s that go out to recruiting duty, if they are reasonably successful, they're going to be O5 commanders. If you are an enlisted Marine that goes on recruiting duty and you go up to a board to be promoted, you have a higher percentage of being promoted. Specifically, if you go recruiting, the board is going to look and they're going to say, "I see the recruiting ribbon, you're getting promoted." Now, here's the thing. Other services want to mimic this, but it's built into the Marine Corps DNA. Our Commandant of the Marine Corps has a recruiting ribbon. Our Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, our highest enlisted Marine, has a recruiting ribbon. So our force believes it. Our force doesn't say, "Yeah, you're just telling me that. I don't want to go to recruiting duty." They're like, "No, I got selected for recruiting duty. I'm scared, but I must be doing something good," generally speaking. So that allows the people to be the best. So we have the best people being led by the best we have to offer. And I know best is a relative term, but I can tell you this, and I tell this to people all the time. Being screened and selected for something does mean something. because there were people who were screened and not selected. So you were at least screened, right? So be proud of what you're doing. Here's the other thing, proven system. The system that the Marine Corps uses is called the Marine Corps Systematic Recruiting. So what we mean by systematic recruiting is we have a system and a process by which we train every recruiter, every officer to do. We tell them what to do, we run them through the training, and we supervise the process. It's built for that. And my boss likes to tell people all the time that the Marine Corps recruiting system and recruiting command was built not in peacetime, but the people who built this system built it based on our success in combat. And that was based on the Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time and the head of manpower of the Marine Corps at the time, who had both served in World War II in Korea. And they looked at the Marines performing in combat, and they said, the only way that the Marine Corps continues to be the Marine Corps is if we continue to find Marines. That's it. Because fundamentally, the Marine Corps is different because we believe we are. And that belief goes a long way in doing something different and proving ourselves each and every day. So because of that, you got to have a system where you're finding those people, or you're trying to do the best you can to create access for an applicant to know what they're going to get into, to self-select, basically. In many cases, what really happens is the best we show our recruiters out like this in uniform, day to day. This is their working uniform, not their camis, not a t-shirt. They're in a dress uniform, and they show their best every day. And what we typically do is we put ourselves in front of potential applicants, and we create a scenario where people self-select to become Marines. That's what happens. I always tell this story. This is a true story. So 35 years ago, right? Actually 36 years ago, I'm a senior in high school. I'm walking into the Joint Forces recruiting station. I want to be in the Army. That's a fact. I grew up in Hampton, Virginia. You got Fort Houston, Army base, Norfolk Naval Base, Navy Base, Langley Air Force Base. There are no Marine bases in Hampton, Virginia. I don't even know what a Marine is. Like, I've never looked into it. I walk in the door, I go to the recruiting station, it's a Saturday, I show up in front of the Army recruiting station, I yank on the door, it's locked. Nobody's in there. A Marine leans into the hallway. Hey! What? What are you doing? I was like, I'm here to see the recruiter. He goes, he pulled me down the hallway. I walk in, a young female sergeant, male sergeant, another male sergeant, and I walk in and I'm like, this is different. And I was done. They had me, I signed up, delayed entry program. I was freaking 17 years old. I basically go home, I gotta get my mom's signature. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's over, Mom, I'm doing this. I'm in, that's it. And that's what we're trying to create, right? Is this intangible picture whose personification is the Marine that is standing in front of the applicant. Sometimes that works very well. We're just like every other service. We've got good, we've got average, we've got some bad. But what we attempt to do is screen and place the best ones out there so that the applicant looks and says, yeah, I want to be some of that. In my case, they hit the jackpot. I mean, all three of those cats were in top shape. They were wearing that uniform, and I was like, man. I mean, I'm serious. I'd never forget it to this day. I was like, I'm in. It was a total difference, right? And the other cats weren't even there that day. Like, it was a Saturday, and they were all in the office, and all the other stations were closed. Like, all the other services' doors were locked, the lights were out, and they were in there, like, full on duty. Like, hey, what's up? Yep, let's have a talk. Here's our benefit tags. Here's what we believe. I was like, okay, I'll take some of that. So intangibles. Standards remain the same. We talked about the tattoos. And we don't do bonuses. Like, we don't do all that stuff. And it's not because we don't care. We do some. We just can't compete with the money that the other services can offer. So why would we even compete in that space? We can do things like 1,000, 5,000. We do things like for LOSs or for you to ship early, to do stuff like that. But it's not like, hey, join us and get $30,000. We don't have money like that. We can't do it. I mean, the Marine Corps right now, we're highly paranoid anyway. Our budget is extremely small. Manpower eats 70% of the budget. I mean, we can't do it. So what do? Is we just tell them the truth. We said, we think we're special. If you think you're special, you might want to be part of us. If you want to do it, we promise. Here's what I tell people. I had a guy ask me this. I was a colonel. I was about to take over colonel command years ago, and I was at a course that we call Cornerstone, where all our commanders go to. And there was a PhD, he was standing on the stage, and he looked in the audience and he says, can somebody here describe to me what you offer my kid? What does the Marine Corps offer my kid? And people yelled out some things, and I thought about it deeply for a moment. I said, if you wanted me to summarize it in one sentence, I believe that what we offer as the Marine Corps is we offer those who are willing to accept it the opportunity to become the best versions of themselves through a successive set of challenges and positive leadership. That's what we offer. That's what the commercials show. We don't show commercials about, hey, it's cool, and that. We show people getting after it, and we show them becoming better, and then at the end of it we say, hey, that's your bonus. You are better than you were. I will use my son as the example. My son graduated high school, got accepted to University of Pittsburgh, went there, and came home shortly thereafter. He became a Marine, graduated from boot camp, did 4 years, said, Dad, I want to go back to college, graduated with honors, magna cum laude. Now, the only difference between those two students was one pivotal one. They were both my son, who's a little bit older, but you know the difference was one was a Marine and one wasn't. And that's the truth. In fact, that's what all services really do when you help them get through. Because I'll speak for my sister services here. Is that I tell my graduates and the honor graduates that graduate boot camp all the time, is that what you have really learned is that you have the capacity to go somewhere you've never been before and be challenged in a way that you've never been challenged before and be successful, and you've proven it to yourself. So when my son went to school the first time, he was like, this is so tough. The second time he went back, he said, they only actually have me in class 18 hours a week. He's like, this is ridiculous. And I was like, yes, son, it is. And he's like, yeah, this is easy. Because he was a Marine. So now he knew the difference. So really, I believe that if we stay there, that every one of these young people that we are going after still want that. They want to be better. They know it. So, with that being said, I shortened my brief so I could answer questions. I gave you some anecdotes, and I'm willing to talk details about data. But ultimately, what I would tell you is that what's making the Marine Corps successful right now is a handful of things. Our brand has not changed. The brand is focused on the intangibles. It's not focused on the tangibles, which move. The economy changes, so offering money moves up and down. Education cost changes, moves up and down. But becoming a better person stays the same. And the people we want to do that. We stay on service. That's what we talk about. We don't talk about doing something else. It's about serving. I think the people that we want know that, and they want that. We don't lower standards. Like, how do you make that argument? Hey, you want to join us? We've made it easier to do it. Who wants to do that? I mean, that's crazy, right? So we're never going to do that. We're going to say rise to our standard. And people go, yeah, okay, I get it. I want to do some of that. And we pick the best people. We invest in the system. And everybody in the system understands that they've been invested in. And the Marine Corps itself knows that it won't exist without making Marines. So if that's the case, and since it's core to who we are, we don't have to argue with ourselves about resourcing that mission. So I would say takeaways in your own private sector is, if you really believe that your organization wants to have the best people, then you have to invest into the people who find them. You can outsource some of it, I get all that, but whoever's the key person in charge of that needs to know that they're an important person in this game and that they're heavily invested in getting the right people.
Thank you, Brigadier General Lyons. If you got questions, please come up to the mic here. He's here. We got about 20 minutes, and he can answer those questions for you. He's ready and standing by.
Yeah, I made it short on purpose because I can talk longer. Yeah.
General, you mentioned the Marine Corps hasn't changed the standards for entry.
Yeah.
I know the Navy just recently has allowed lower, non-high school diploma, non-GED.
Yeah.
Pros and cons. What are your thoughts on that?
So the pros is that it still allows my recruiters to sell the intangibles and what I mentioned, which is that we want the best and we're going to help make you the best. The challenge is, I don't know if that's a con, but the challenge is that in some of my markets, it increases the load on the recruiter. For instance, in one of the regions I just visited, there's a high propensity for the individuals in that area to join the Marine Corps, but for some of my recruiters in that region, it takes 40 interviews to find 4 people who qualify initially for the ASVAB practice test. So ratios like that means that a 10-to-1 ratio means that the level of stress that I place on the recruiter to find the qualified person goes up. The Navy and the Army have come up with some different ways to do that by saying, okay, we're not going to make you have to work that hard. We're going to take whoever's there, because they're not saying, hey, a 10 is the end game. They're saying we'll take a 10 and make a 10 through a training process and an intense kind of academic rigor process and make them into higher scores. From what I've seen, I don't want to speak too much for them. Yeah.
And a kind of a follow-up is, you mentioned you joined 35 years ago.
Yes.
So you saw the surge in recruiting, at the start of the war.
Yep.
And as we've drawn down, obviously it's harder to recruit.
Yes.
Are you seeing, as we collectively as a country seem to be preparing for potential conflict, is there a surge right now? Do you see any?
I do not see a surge, and I will tell you, I do not believe that the United States populace believes that we're preparing for anything. I don't think they really believe that at all. And I don't think it's because the population's bad. I think we've conditioned them that way. So in our ability to be in sustained conflict for over 20 years without significantly affecting the fabric of society as we know it, has conditioned the American people that no matter how much you talk up China or talk up even what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, I do not believe that there's a groundswell of people who now go, man, we might be getting after it, I want to join. That does not comport with what I've seen in actuality. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Sir, good morning. Commander Decker, I'm one of the medical officers up at Med Battalion.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that the time between your initial contact with a recruit and your ability to send them to boot camp, there was an increased medical portion, is that
Yes.
because we're asking more medical questions, or because medical's not serving you as well to get people out?
No, I appreciate you asking that question because I left something off. I thought it was on my slides, but I left it off. So the Department of Defense has instituted a system called MHS Genesis. Now, that medical system, while I don't want to speak for DOD, my understanding of why that was placed in position was the belief that the amount of people that were leaving the Department of Defense as a whole, all the services, with medical issues, were based on people having preconditions prior to a session. So the idea was to create a system that could access the health information exchange in our current digital environment to allow records to be reviewed in a more detailed manner, to eliminate people with preconditions who probably shouldn't be in the military service at all. What that has effectively done is it has created a funnel that tightens how many people can actually be qualified. And that's based on this. I'll give you a practical example. So, you may come into my office. I'm a recruiter. I have a form, like any good recruiter would have, that allows me to interview you, and I ask you a set of questions. Do you have any of these medical conditions? So once I find out you have one of those, I start saying, hey, can you go get your medical records? You say, okay. That's a process. Once I get all those together, I say, we're going to take you to MEPS and get you qualified. You show up to MEPS, there's a medical officer at MEPS. The MEPS medical officer takes your social security number or identification number, puts it in the MHS Genesis, the Health Information Exchange spits out 300 pages of records. Now you're looking through those, and you're like, oh, I found this. What's that all about? I need a consult for that. Now, go home. Now the person who was going to sign up goes back home, and now we have to figure out how to get some other medical officer to take a look and go, hey, what you saw is okay, right? So that's what's causing that process. So not only is it finding somebody, asking them if they have issues like we used to, it's then tracking down those medical records, hoping, not knowing, because we don't have access to the Health Information Exchange. MEPS does, our recruiters don't, and then finding out after we've done our record search that there's additional records that need to be found or more information associated with that person's life. And in some cases, the applicant doesn't know anything about it. Because how many people here remember what happened to you when you were 3? You just don't, right? So we've had a situation where, I'll give you a quick example. There's a young female applicant who is a dependent of a military person who now has decided to join the Marine Corps. We take her, we find out, she says, hey, I'm good to go, everything's good to go. We take her to MEPS. The Health Information Exchange shows that she had a condition or she was diagnosed at one time for something that now is causing her to be not qualified. She comes back home. The recruiter takes her to see her parents who are now retired. They don't remember. They're like, we don't even know what you're talking about. Well, guess what? She was in the TRICARE system. Well, TRICARE does not allow us to request records from TRICARE. TRICARE tells the recruiter and the family to go back to the hospital. So now they have to do a fax machine. Believe it or not, in 2024, there are hospitals that are still using fax machines. And they have to go through this process of getting these records so that now we have to wait, request, so that those records can go back. This young lady was going back and forth to get medically qualified for 4 months. And only her desire to be a Marine allowed her to be patient enough to deal with that and then go to boot camp. Does that help?
Yes, sir. I guess if there's nobody else, my one rejoinder would be, I guess at the end of that, do you feel that we're getting a better product right, out of boot camp, are we getting a lower rate of medical illnesses that will prevent completion of that enlistment or future career, truncate that career? And do we need to, as a Navy Health Service supporting the Marine Corps, need to apply more effort to that, supporting you guys in recruitment?
I think writ large, to answer your question, if everybody heard it, he's like, hey, has it helped? Basically. My answer is that there's no data to show whether or not anything we're doing with MHS Genesis makes any sense at all. It's not me being critical of the system. I'm not saying that. And I'm not making that caveat to protect myself. I'm just saying I'm being fair. There's just no data. Now, I believe that a longitudinal study would be required that would show application process, waivers, non-waivers, accession, boot camp, end of first enlistment to determine whether or not we've made a difference at all. But there's currently no data that I'm aware of that would be able to do that, because even the data that we have from the Naval Health Research Center, I'll throw them a plug. They've been doing a longitudinal study for years. It did not take into account this. It just studies what we've assessed and how long people have stayed. It can't tell me whether or not the additional screening has now made us more effective or less effective.
Thanks. All right.
General, thank you for the brief. I just got a follow-on to that question. You mentioned data. Can you share with us MCRD attrition, DEP attrition, as well as from MCRD, medical discharges?
Yeah, so I want to be careful about this, but on average, we average about 12% attrition at boot camp. But that 12% attrition is a conglomeration of all the attrition. So some of that can be refusing to train, some of that can be people who have a disqualifying tattoo once they get to boot camp when we do a more intensive look. An example of that would be a recruiter doesn't look underneath people's shirt. They have them in shorts, but they don't look at the thigh. They don't do that. But if you have like a Navy, I'll just keep going. You have something very offensive that's located in that area, we'll see it at boot camp. So it includes that. Medically, I want to tell you that medical, we have gone farther in boot camp than I have ever imagined we would go. The boot camp that we have now is much better than the boot camp that we've had before, which is why even at 12%, which I'm not saying I'm proud of, the bulk of that is not consumed by a bunch of medical people getting broken. We have a human performance team. And that health center is connected to a barracks where when we have Marines drop, they go to that barracks to be rehabilitated. One of my favorite stories that I brag on all the time, if you've heard me talk before, is about 4 or 5 months ago, we had a integrated company, and what that means is we have a female platoon, one female platoon, and 5 male platoons in an integrated company. We do that so that our female recruits can be together as opposed to being sprinkled all throughout. So they're together training, but each of the platoons are there. In an integrated company, we had a female honor graduate. It was not significant that she was female. What was really significant was that she had been a drop, an IST failure when she got there. So she came there, failed the initial strength test, was sent to special training company, was given the extra time she needed to get ready, and got so good that she was the honor graduate of a follow-on company. So that means to me that the recruit training piece, we got that. We figured that out. And the goal of recruit training is to assess, not to screen. So because of that, I think that part of it is good. So, and the medical that I have does another screening once they come, but it's not to screen to eliminate, it's to ensure that they will safely complete recruit training. Does that kind of answer what you're looking at?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, got it.
Good morning, sir.
Hey.
Thanks again for taking the time to speak with us today. The end straight from the Marine Corps right now is about 177,000. If you needed to double that in preparation for a war, do you think your recruiting processes would change?
Okay. Two quick things. We're actually closer to 173 right now. And our new commandant, I don't want to get in front of him, but there is talk about us going up to 177. 177, 178 was where we were when 9/11 occurred. So our war fighting footing, we believe, is somewhere around 178. But I don't want to get in front. That's just my opinion based on the data that I have. But I know we're close to 173. The question was, if we had to double that, would our recruiting effort change? I would say that to double that, the draft would be initiated. And we wouldn't be worried about recruiting. Because if we have to double from 173 to 350, it's on. Like, it's on. And the nation better be mobilizing to double that number. We have seen, not necessarily our recruiting techniques, but we have seen where the Marine Corps went from 178 to 202 in a short period of time. And that was a combination of raising the mission for recruiting, but it was a different time where we didn't have the same challenges we had now, and it was an increase in retention that allowed us to get to the 202 number. And when we did that, there was some good and some bad to that. So there were some people that were like, hey, we might be getting rid of, where we were like, no, you're staying. But as you can imagine, I think in the scenario that you're painting, there's a lot of people going who, if we were in some picky times, we'd be like, maybe not. But if if we need to double the Marine Corps, we're all going. All right, gotcha. Does that help?
It does. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? You can ask anything. At the risk of getting in trouble, I'll tell you anything you want to know. I don't care.
All right, General, thank you for that brief. It was thorough and provided a great understanding of recruiting in the Marine Corps and how it works. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.